The phone drilled the dark at 3 a.m., and Maya answered before the second ring, breath thin as glass. A text slid in after. Ethan said, "We need to talk." The words bled light into the room like a wound. She stared at the 3 dots that never moved and held her breath until it hurt. Maya whispered, "I'm awake," but the line was a winter road with no cars. She replayed voice notes he sent last week, the ones that promised spring. Her ceiling fan ticked like a slow clock, and hope kept limping forward. Ethan said, "It's not a good time hours ago," and the words kept echoing like shoes in a stairwell. She scrolled to their first selfie and felt the ground tilt under her bed. Rain pressed its face to the window and listened. She texted, "Are you safe?" and waited for a tiny blue miracle that never came. The city yawned outside, indifferent. She set the phone down, then grabbed it again, as if it might shatter without her hands. Ethan said, "I'll call soon," and silence answered for him. Morning arrived like a verdict, and Maya moved through it on autopilot. Jordan said, "You look wrecked," while handing coffee that smelled like mercy. She nodded and lied with a smile that had no teeth. The subway rattled beneath the city, and her hope clung to the bar like a tired hand. Ethan said, "Time zones are killing me," in last week's call, and the words still excused everything. She scrolled chats and found daylight stitched with apologies and plans. Her reflection in the train window looked like a person auditioning for strength. Jordan said, "You can't live on promises," and she swallowed a defense she no longer believed. An old couple held hands near the door, and it hurt in a specific way. She typed, "Call when you wake," and backspaced until the message vanished. The tunnel light strobed across her face like a lie detector. She told herself, love was just late, not lost. The train pulled into the day, and her chest stayed dark. At lunch, her phone lay face up like a lifeboat, and waves of silence kept breaking over it. Jordan said, "Eat first, wait later," pushing fries toward her. Maya smiled at the ketchup swirl and tasted nothing. Ethan said, "Big deadline," in a text that felt recycled from another day. She typed a joke and deleted it, because laughter should not beg. Across the cafe glass, the street soaked in noon sun, and everything looked honest. A song hummed from the speakers, soft and cruel. Jordan said, "You deserve presents, not pings," and the sentence lodged like a splinter. Maya nodded and tucked her phone under a napkin, pretending power. The table wobbled, and she steadied it with her knee like she steadied her heart. She whispered, "Just call," to nobody who could hear. The waiter asked about dessert, and the words sounded like a fairy tale. Time kept chewing. Evening pooled in the apartment, and she built a small altar of patience. She set her laptop, stacked his postcards, and placed the phone like a candle. Ethan said, "Tonight for sure," last weekend, and the phrase rang like a ringtone she could not answer. She opened their shared playlist and let track 2 breathe. Guitar strings drew lines across the room. She drafted a message about missing his laugh and closed it without sending. Jordan said, "Come over," but the invitation felt like leaving a lighthouse. She perched by the window, counting red tail lights. The rain returned and tapped the glass like a friend with bad news. She whispered, "Tell me it's nothing," and the room pretended to believe her. A siren passed and painted her walls in emergency. She imagined his voice crossing miles like a bridge of wire. The song ended, and the phone stayed mute. At 11:58 p.m., a message arrived like a coin dropped in a well. Ethan said, "Can we talk tomorrow?" And the floor in her chest tilted. She typed yes, though every nerve howled, "Now." The typing bubble teased and vanished, a ghost performing. She remembered the way his laugh folded crowds into private rooms. Jordan said, if he wanted to, he would weeks ago, and truth finally knocked. She walked a small loop from desk to sink and back, rehearsing forgiveness she had not been asked for. The clock flipped to a new day that felt old. She answered, "Sure, I'm around," and pressed send like closing a door on a storm. The room waited, then exhaled without relief. She turned off the lamp and lay down, facing the phone like a shoreline. The screen stayed black, steady as a verdict. The night held its breath for her and did not share it. Morning stacked small mercies on the counter, and Maya lined them up like evidence. Jordan said, "Start with eggs," not his messages, and slid a skillet into the light. The pan hissed, a tiny storm she could control. Maya said, "He's just buried," and the word felt like a shovel. The kettle clicked off, and the apartment smelled like survival in progress. Jordan said, "Buried men still text," then softened it with a half smile. The toast popped up, startled as hope, and Maya buttered it like truce. Her phone face down, a quiet animal she did not pet. She said, "We planned July," and the month sounded like a foreign country. Jordan said, "Plan yourself first," and the sentence landed true. The day knocked at the window, and she finally opened it. At the office, her desk became a border checkpoint for thoughts trying to cross. Her manager said, "Client review at 2, and the clock nodded like a judge. Maya opened slides and stitched logic until it held. Ethan said, "Proud of you," in a memory she kept replaying for courage. The cursor blinked in the note's pane, a lighthouse for scattered ships. Jordan pinged, "Lunch later," and the bubble of care rose through noise. Maya said, "I'm okay," to the empty room, and it did not argue. She revised a chart and felt the small wind warm her palms. The building hummed like a patient ocean, steady and impersonal. She tucked her phone in the drawer and locked it like a promise to herself. The day advanced, and she advanced with it. In the park, benches wore sunlight like medals, and trees breathed with her. Jordan said, "Tell me the best version of him," and unwrapped 2 pastries. Maya laughed. "He mailed me postcards with maps drawn in ink, and the sky felt closer." She said, "He learned my commute times to call between stations, and the path brightened." Jordan said, "And the worst version," and the leaves waited. Maya traced a circle on her coffee lid and said, "He disappears when I need him most." The wind agreed with a gentle push. She added, "But I keep explaining it as distance, not choice." Jordan said, "Your heart deserves choices too." They ate in quiet that did not hurt. A bike bell sang, and she did not flinch. That evening, boxes of keepsakes came down from the closet like a weather change. Maya said, "Inventory of faith," and set them on the rug. Postcards, ticket stubs, and the scarf he left on a winter visit formed a map of almost. Ethan said, "We're building this," in an old voice note that still stood upright. She pressed play, and the room filled with plans that had furniture. Jordan said, "What have you built for you?" and the question rearranged the air. Maya folded the scarf and placed it in a smaller box marked later. She said, "I want a life that doesn't pause when he does." The radiator clicked like applause from the wall. She wrote a list labeled today and left tomorrow, empty on purpose. The night felt less like a hallway and more like a door. Later, the call finally came as she washed dishes, hands in small clouds. Ethan said, "Long week," and the apology wrote in tired. She said, "I needed you yesterday," and the faucet hushed to listen. He said, "I'm here now," and the now already felt thin. She dried her hands and leaned against the counter like a witness. He said, "July is complicated," and the month slipped through her fingers. Maya said, "Complicated is not the same as impossible." Silence stretched its arms. He said, "I want this," and left the sentence on crutches. She answered, "So do I, but I also want me." The call ended with a goodbye that sounded more honest than sweet. She set the phone down and decided to keep standing. The weekend arrived heavy with silence, and Maya's phone lay still like a verdict. Ethan said, work piled up in his last text, but the words felt pre-used, worn thin from repetition. She scrolled through social feeds and found his coworker tagging him in photos of laughter she wasn't part of. Her heart cramped at the sight of him in places she had memorized only through his stories. Jordan said, "That's not absence, that's replacement," and her chest tightened. She whispered, "No, it's just colleagues," but her defense cracked midair. The apartment walls bent closer, listening like judges. She replayed a video of his voice telling her goodnight last winter, when distance felt like a bridge, not a canyon. Her thumb hovered over call, then retreated like it touched flame. Ethan said, "I miss you" once, and she wondered if he even meant the same words anymore. Later at brunch, Jordan leaned across the table and said, "Why let a ghost starve you of real laughter?" Maya forced a smile and answered, "Because he isn't a ghost, he's mine." The clink of dishes around them sounded louder than her certainty. She stirred coffee until the spoon rattled against porcelain like restless bones. Jordan said, "Mine means present, not pending," and the truth cut cleaner than the knife on her plate. Maya bit into toast that tasted like dust. Ethan's name on her phone stayed gray, unread. She whispered, "He promised me forever," and the word forever felt borrowed from someone else's language. The waiter asked if they wanted dessert, and she shook her head quickly as if sugar could betray her restraint. The table became a mirror of choices unmade. That night she dialed his number, each ring like a nail in wood. The voicemail answered. Ethan said, "Leave it after the beep," in a voice she both craved and resented. She whispered, "I just wanted to hear you," but hung up before finishing. Her reflection in the dark window looked like someone waiting at a station with no trains. Jordan texted, "Don't beg the silence," and her fingers froze mid-reply. She replayed the rings in her head, each echo sounding emptier. She whispered, "Please call," though the night did not echo back. A siren wailed in the distance, as if the city understood what it meant to be left unanswered. The phone stayed cold in her hand while her chest burned. Monday returned with cruel punctuality, and Maya dragged herself into the office where unanswered emails mirrored unanswered texts. Her manager said, "We'll need revisions," and she nodded, though her mind replayed Ethan's absence. She opened a message draft titled simply him, full of confessions she would never send. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat about to fail. Jordan leaned against her desk at break and said, "He's not showing up for you, but you keep showing up for him." Maya whispered, "If I stop, what if he thinks I never cared?" The printer churned in the corner like a tired witness. She minimized the draft and typed work instead of longing. Yet in the margin of her notebook, she scribbled his name and underlined it twice until the paper tore. That evening she joined friends for dinner, laughter buzzing around her like a hive she couldn't enter. Plates clattered, glasses toasted, and still her phone lay face up beside her untouched fork. Ethan had sent nothing, not even a placeholder. She smiled when someone asked about her weekend, but her voice cracked like thin ice. She said, "Just quiet," and the word quiet tasted bitter. Jordan caught her eye across the table, a silent warning wrapped in compassion. She excused herself, stepped outside, and the night air bit her skin awake. She scrolled through their old threads where love bloomed in emojis and late-night vows. Now it felt like a museum of promises. The streetlights hummed above her, cold and steady, while her chest unraveled. Tuesday evening folded in like a letter she did not want to open. Maya sifted receipts for budget peace and found a charge from a wine bar she once pinned for their next visit. Ethan said, "Someday soon," when she sent that pin months back, and someday felt stolen. She searched the bar's page and saw fairy lights, brick walls, and a table shaped like their plan. A new photo in the tagged feed showed a jacket she recognized, draped on a chair. Jordan said, "Zoom in with caution," and her pulse obeyed and disobeyed at once. Maya zoomed and saw the cuff fray he hated, now turned outward like a flag. A woman's sleeve edged the frame, soft cream wool, a ring flashing like a small sun. Maya whispered, "Coincidence?" And the word tasted like aspirin without water. The page refreshed and the photo vanished to private like a bird into trees. She stared at the blank square where proof had been and felt the room lose oxygen. Her phone rang with his name, and relief sprinted before it knew the terrain. She answered, "Hi," in a voice balanced on a wire. Ethan said, "Long day," and the phrase arrived with the sound of laughter muffled behind him. She said, "Where are you?" as casually as a fire alarm. He said, "Office thing," and a second voice called, "Your glass," before he lowered the mic. Jordan texted, "Stay calm," but calm felt like a locked room. Maya said, "I heard someone," and waited for a name he could carry cleanly. He said, "Coworkers," and air moved through the lie like wind in a cracked window. She said, "Send a photo," and the silence weighed more than proof. He said, "Battery dying," and the call ended like a door pressed shut with both hands. She stood very still to keep the world from recognizing her break. Minutes later, Jordan sent a screenshot that glowed like a flare. Jordan said, "Coworker tagged a story before locking it," and the image showed a toast under the same lights. Maya pinched to enlarge until pixels sighed. Ethan's profile leaned toward a woman whose hand rested on his sleeve with a mapmaker's claim. The caption read, "To second chances," and her ribs learned a new angle for pain. Jordan said, "This is not maybe," and the floor steadied only to drop again. Maya whispered her name and tapped the account. The grid revealed trips, brunches, and a dog whose collar matched his baseball cap. She shut her eyes and saw every mile of distance arrange itself into a hiding place. Jordan said, "I'm here," and the words placed a chair under her falling. She drafted a message that began with his name and ended with nothing she wanted to swallow. Maya typed, "Is Lily your coworker?" and watched the cursor blink like a metronome for panic. Ethan replied, "She's on the project," and the word project tried to cover a heartbeat. She said, "Were you at Arcadia Wine?" and the typing bubble danced, then froze, then died. Jordan said, "Ask the question you fear," and her hands steadied by defiance. Maya wrote, "Are you seeing her?" and pressed send as if throwing a flare into fog. The reply came slow, each dot a step to a cliff. Ethan said, "It's complicated," and the last railing snapped. She stared at the two words until they emptied of meaning and still carried all of it. The night refused to move, so she moved first. Maya said, "I deserve the truth," and dialed with a steadiness learned in storms. He answered with a breath that carried the smell of a bar she had never entered. Ethan said, "I didn't plan this," and the sentence tried to beg without kneeling. She said, "But you allowed it," and the quiet answered, "Yes." A voice in the background asked, "Are you coming back?" and the floor stopped pretending. Jordan texted, "I'm outside if you need me," and the offer landed like a lifeline. Maya said, "I'm not a layover," and the truth fit her mouth at last. The call ended on her terms, and the room finally returned her air. She stood in that air and chose not to sit. The storm inside her refused to wait, so Maya dialed again, words sharpened into steel. Ethan answered, "Maya, please," but the plea felt thin as tissue. She said, "No more half-truths, no more shadows," her voice breaking but louder than before. He said, "It wasn't serious," and the excuse curled like smoke too late to stop the fire. Maya shouted, "You wore my love like armor while reaching for someone else." The silence that followed felt like a confession without words. Jordan texted, "Breathe first," but breathing felt like betrayal. Ethan said, "I can explain," and she answered, "I don't want explanations, I want respect." Her palm stung from gripping the phone, and her reflection in the dark glass looked like someone who no longer begged. The call became a battlefield, and she realized she wasn't losing anymore. She was choosing. She whispered, "Do you love her?" and the silence carried the weight of a verdict. Ethan said, "It just happened," and the words detonated in her chest. She said, "You don't trip into love, you walk toward it." His breath cracked on the line, but she didn't wait for comfort. Jordan said, "Truth hurts less than lies stretched thin," and Maya finally believed it. Ethan said, "You're still my everything," and she laughed bitterly. "Then why wasn't I enough in the room you chose?" The thunder outside cracked at the same moment, as if the city sided with her. Her hands shook, but her voice grew steadier. "You taught me distance is measured in choices, not miles." He said nothing, and that silence sealed what she already knew. The call dragged until words became knives. Ethan said, "I didn't want to lose you," and she replied, "You lost me the moment you lied." He begged, "We can fix this," and she said, "I'm not a patch on your torn choices." The storm softened, but her anger stayed electric. Jordan's earlier words hummed in her chest. Love is not supposed to be begging for crumbs. Maya walked the room, each step steadier, each inhale freer. Ethan said, "I still need you," and she answered, "You needed me enough to betray me." His voice cracked into static, and she realized even the connection didn't want to hold them anymore. She said goodbye and pressed end, her thumb the final judge. The phone blackened, and so did everything they once built. Maya collapsed on the rug, surrounded by postcards, ticket stubs, and pieces of a love she once worshipped. She said, "This was my altar," and pushed the memories into a pile. Jordan knocked softly, asking, "May I come in?" and she nodded without voice. Jordan sat beside her and said, "You were brave tonight." Maya whispered, "I feel shattered, not brave." Jordan placed a hand over hers and answered, "Shattered glass still cuts lies clean." Tears blurred the keepsakes until they were just colors. Maya said, "He was my whole plan," and Jordan said, "Now you get to plan for you." The quiet between them was no longer empty, it was shelter. Near dawn, exhaustion held her body, but clarity held her mind. Maya stood at the window and said to herself, "I am not what he abandoned, I am what survives." The city below pulsed awake, indifferent yet alive. She whispered, "I deserved more than half love," and the words sounded final. Jordan stirred on the couch, blanket draped, silent support even in sleep. Maya typed one last message, "Don't call me again," and hit send without shaking. She placed the phone face down, not as a prayer but as a gravestone. The storm had passed, leaving the sky bruised but honest. For the first time in months, she felt her lungs expand fully. The night that broke her also carved space for morning. Morning arrived without apology, and Maya tested the quiet like a bridge after a flood. Jordan said, "Breakfast then boundaries," flipping pancakes with a gentleness that refused pity. Maya smiled, small and real, the kind that fits without strain. She said, "Today I choose errands, sleep, and no explanations." The kettle hissed like a promise kept by steam. Jordan said, "If he calls, you do not owe a theater." Maya answered, "I owe myself a door that shuts and opens for me." They ate in a sunlit truce that felt earned, not borrowed. Her phone rested face down, a tool and no longer a temple. She planned laundry, a plant repot, and a walk where her feet could vote for forward. Jordan said, "Healing is paperwork and patience." Maya laughed because bureaucracy finally sounded kind. The day lifted its shoulders, and she lifted hers to match. At the plant shop, green crowded the air with forgiveness. Maya said, "I want something that survives neglect and reward." The clerk pointed at a pothos that trailed like patient handwriting. She stroked a leaf the way she once soothed panic. Jordan texted, "Proud of you for being out," and the words landed soft. Maya chose a terracotta pot, unglazed and honest, then added soil that smelled like beginnings. She said, "I am allowed to rebuild without a speech." A bell chimed as a couple entered, laughing in a language she did not need to translate. She did not flinch at their closeness, only noticed the light on their jackets. Outside, the street shook rain from last night, and everything felt rinsed. Maya carried the plant like a small vote for later. Her steps kept the rhythm of her own name. Back home, she repotted on newspaper that whispered under the soil. Maya said, "Old roots, new room," and tipped the plant with steady care. Her phone lit with Ethan's name, a call she did not invite. She let it ring into silence, then into voicemail, then into nothing. Jordan said, "I'm here if you need a witness," from the couch where a book waited open. Maya answered, "I need a mirror that tells the truth," and looked at her hands, dirty and alive. She played music without their playlist and found a beat that knew her before him. The soil filled the pot, and the stems settled like shoulders after tension. Another call arrived and passed through the air like weather. Maya washed her hands and chose not to listen. The plant lifted its face to the window, and so did she. Evening brought the practical mercy of laundry and lists. Maya folded shirts like contracts with herself, neat and binding. A voicemail waited, and she pressed play because courage also listens. Ethan said, "I miss us," and the word "us" felt like a rental he had not paid for. She paused, then deleted, and did not tremble. Jordan said, "Closure is not a gift he can mail," and Maya nodded at the dryer's steady sermon. She wrote 3 sentences in her journal that fit on 1 page. She said, "I loved, I lost, I lived," then closed the cover like a finished shift. The apartment warmed around the small labor of order. She placed the journal beside the plant and felt space open in her ribs. The night did not argue with her peace. Later, she met Jordan on the roof, where the city kept its honest horizon. Jordan said, "How does it feel without the echo?" Maya breathed deep and answered, like a room with windows finally unlocked. Wind threaded their hair and carried away the last of the storm's old name. Maya said, "I forgive myself for staying, and for leaving," and the words fit like a jacket that finally matched the weather. Jordan smiled. "You built a door and walked through it." Below them, traffic hummed a responsible lullaby. Maya texted herself a reminder that simply read, "Choose me." She saved it without alarms because memory would keep it. The skyline blinked in practical stars, and she let the view finish the sentence. Tomorrow would not need a witness to be real. The week's silence hardened into clarity, and Maya no longer measured days by his absence. She said, "I survived the storm. I survived myself," while writing in her journal. Jordan said, "You're stronger than the wreckage," sipping tea in the corner. The apartment felt less like a waiting room and more like a home. Outside, the city carried on without apology, and she didn't need one. Maya folded the page and whispered, "Goodbye doesn't mean weak, it means done." She walked past the coffee shop where they once FaceTimed, and the memory did not drag her feet. Maya said, "That chapter belongs behind glass," and kept moving. The barista waved hello, unaware of the ghosts once seated by the window. Her reflection in the glass looked steady, no longer fractured. The air smelled of espresso and rain, but the scent no longer carried him. She pulled her jacket closer and said, "I'm still here, and that's enough." At the bookstore, she traced spines and remembered how Ethan once promised, "We'll build shelves together." The promise no longer cut, it dissolved like sugar in tea. She picked a novel about beginnings and smiled. A child tugged her sleeve by mistake, and she laughed with ease she thought gone. Jordan texted, "Movie later?" and she answered, "Yes," without hesitation. Maya whispered, "Love isn't gone, it's just mine now," and carried the book to the counter. On the rooftop again, the skyline stretched open like an unmarked page. Jordan said, "You glow different now," and Maya laughed. "Maybe it's the wind." She leaned against the railing, no weight pressing her down. Traffic hummed below, steady but distant. Maya said, "I thought love was proof I mattered, but I matter without proof." The night sky blinked steady lights, and she blinked back without tears. Near midnight, she placed her phone on the nightstand, screen black like a sealed chapter. Maya said softly, "He will never light up my night again," and the words landed final. She curled beneath her blanket, not as someone abandoned, but as someone free. Outside, rain began again, but it sang without menace. The plant on her sill stretched toward the window, alive as she was. Sleep arrived steady, carrying her into tomorrow without fear.